I call the First Minister.
Mr Speaker, I am grateful to you for agreeing to recall the Assembly today and permitting me to take the time a statement about my role in the Renewable Heat Incentive Scheme. Unlike the normal practice, which by the way you endorsed, unlike the normal practice on these occasions, I want to make it clear that this statement has not been cleared or approved by the Deputy First Minister. I felt it was important that I come before the House at the earliest opportunity. For almost 2 weeks now, there has been a barrage of media coverage on this matter, including wild claims and allegations, many of which have been based on spin rather than reality. However, Mr Speaker, this morning I want to set out the actual facts to the Assembly. To repeat what I have already said in media interviews, I also want to make it clear that in order to get to the bottom of this entire issue, I am prepared to waive the normal convention and to give evidence to the Public Accounts Committee. Mr Speaker, the one issue on which we can all agree is that there were shocking errors and failures in the RHI scheme and a catalogue of mistakes, all of which coincided to create the perfect storm, resulting in the position in which we now find ourselves. In all of this, it is critical that lessons are learned and that the costs of the scheme are brought under control. As First Minister, I am determined that this will be done. Mr Speaker, today I want to cover in some detail the establishment of the scheme, the operation of the scheme and the eventual closure of the scheme. I want to set out the policy objectives behind the scheme and the flaws that there were in its operation. I also want to address some of the more common questions that have arisen over this past 2 weeks and, most importantly, to put to rest some of the myths that have grown up around the scheme. However, I also want to make clear that this is not a statement setting out every failing and flaw in the scheme and the process, every missed opportunity and every mistaken assumption. That work has and will continue to be carried out by the Public Accounts Committee. Before I move to the chronology of what occurred, I want to say a few words about ministerial accountability. By convention, ministers are answerable to the Assembly not only for their actions and decisions, but for those of civil servants in their department, regardless of any personal responsibility for actions or omissions by officials. In practice, ministers determine their departmental policies and delegate the implementation of these policies to officials. It is the Departmental Accounting Officer, normally the Permanent Secretary, who is responsible for the stewardship of resources within the Department's control. While it may have been lost amidst the media hype, I am on record as saying I entirely accept that I am accountable to the Assembly for the actions of the Department during my tenure as Minister. I am sorry that the initial scheme did not contain cost control measures and that there were fundamental flaws in its design. This is the deepest political regret of my time in this House. As Minister, I accept responsibility for the work of the Department during my time at DETI. Once again, for the avoidance of doubt, I believe it is right and proper that I answer to this Assembly for my role in the RHI scheme, and not for one moment do I seek to shirk or avoid that responsibility. But if we are to learn lessons from this entire experience, it is essential that we know exactly where things went wrong. The non-domestic RHI scheme was introduced in November 2012. It supports the UK objective of contributing to the EU-wide target that by 2020, 20% of energy consumption should be from renewable sources. The UK share of this target is 15%, and the plan is to achieve this through a combination of 12% renewable heat and 30% renewable electricity by 2020. In Northern Ireland, the renewable heat target is 10% by 2020. The non-domestic scheme incentivises the uptake of renewable heat technologies such as biomass, heat pumps and solar thermal installations. It provides payments for 20 years based on the heat energy generated. The level of tariff is dependent on the size and type of technology, and the calculation of the tariff was intended to cover capital costs, operating costs and non-financial hassle costs over the lifetime of the technology. A domestic RHI scheme was introduced in December of 2014. There was an increase in application numbers during 2015, which escalated quite rapidly to produce the crisis we now face. Focusing on the incentive for small to medium-sized biomass boilers, the scheme provided a tariff of just over 6 pence per unit. Just under £38 million of funding was provided by the Treasury for the Northern Ireland RHI schemes during the 5-year period 2011 to 16. However, scheme uptake was initially low in the first few years, with only 409 applications received by the end of 2014, leading to an underspend of around £15 million during the first 4 years. The total number of renewable heating installations under the non-domestic scheme has increased to over 2,000 by the time the scheme was suspended in February of 2016. Current estimates suggest that around 6% of our total heating needs in Northern Ireland are now met through renewable heating technologies. In addition to the resultant reduction in CO2 emissions, the local Northern Ireland economy is benefiting from the ongoing investment through the RHI schemes. That investment brings benefits in terms of job retention and creation in the energy services sector. And I make these points simply to underline that however bad the execution has turned out to be, the aims of the scheme were good and necessary. One question that has been asked by many people is why we did not simply replicate the Great Britain arrangements into Northern Ireland. And the answer is quite simple. In Great Britain, the main obstacle to the growth of renewable heat was and is the wide availability of affordable natural gas. Here, the main heating fuel is oil, and the gas market is relatively immature. It was even more so in 2012. Hence, it is clear that to simply import the GB arrangement to the Northern Ireland market at that time would not have been appropriate. Mr Speaker, while this statement is not the place to rehearse every failing or flaw in the process, there is one matter which I believe it is important that I address. For it is this error that goes to the very heart of why the costs of the scheme ran out of control. The crucial mistake in the scheme was that the tariff for the most commonly used boilers, small to medium biomass, was set at a level higher than the market price of the relevant fuel, mainly wood pellets. In essence, this created an incentive to continue to burn fuel over and above the levels required for the relevant function, whether a commercial business operation or a community facility, such as a nursing home or a church. Of course, the regulations do not provide for payment for wasted heat or heat that has no functional benefit. However, as the PAC has exposed, a further major failing of the scheme here has been that the necessary aspects of the regulations have not been rigorously enforced. There clearly should have been more and better inspections of businesses long before the summer of 2016. This is the heart of the RHI story, the tariff subsidy being higher than the cost of the wood pellets. Yet DETI's 2012 business case on RHI wrongly stated that the tariff was lower. This crucial misunderstanding informed DETI's attitude to RHI in subsequent years. It helps explain why concerns were not taken seriously enough and why action was not taken quickly enough when problems emerged. With the greatest of respect to those who criticise me for this, I would remind them that I did not simply impose this scheme on the people of Northern Ireland. The tariff was set out in Schedule 3 of the legislation, which was scrutinised by the Enterprise, Trade and Investment Committee and passed after debate by the Northern Ireland Assembly. Indeed, the chair of the committee, Mr Patsy McGlone MLA at the time, said, and I quote, "The committee's scrutiny of the development of the renewable heat incentive has been considerable and reflects the importance and long-term nature of the proposals. Before supporting the RHI, the committee sought and received assurances on incentive and tariff levels, banding levels, incentives for domestic consumers, payments to participants and support levels for the Renewable Heat Premium Payment Scheme." The unfortunate reality is that no one in government or in this Assembly, in their work creating and passing this legislation, picked up on this crucial failing. And, contrary to some accounts in the early years of the scheme, this was not widely picked up by the industry either. In fact, as has been previously stated, during the time I was the Minister responsible, Northern Ireland was underperforming in this area. In my years as Minister, there was an underspend on RHI up to and including my final year at DETI, 2014-15. This is detailed in the Northern Ireland Audit Office report. Take-up in its early years was low. Indeed, hard as it is to believe now, there was even a publicity campaign in 2014 to encourage more applicants. The BBC Spotlight programme and subsequent comment has made significant play of a concerned citizen, and I would ask the entire Assembly, if they were here, to join me in thanking that person for all she did to try to prevent the calamity that we have fallen into. She deserves our highest respect and a sincere apology on behalf of my former department, which should not have dismissed her claims with disbelief, but examined them with diligence. It is no exaggeration to say that had she been listened to on any of the 3 occasions when she approached DETI, the crisis would have been avoided. Unfortunately, it has been difficult to establish the exact facts around contact between the concerned citizen and myself and the department. When asked by Spotlight about correspondence from the concerned citizen, I replied, I passed these concerns on to the departmental officials to investigate. It is now obvious that these investigations should have highlighted the failings of the scheme and ameliorative action should have been taken. I made this statement from memory and on advice that appeared to indicate that she had raised her concerns directly with me. This is also my normal and indeed the appropriate practice to pass any concerns received from members of the public to the relevant departmental officials. However, my response was made without the benefit of having reviewed the concerned citizen's original letter. It is now clear that the initial communication to me did not raise concerns with the RHI scheme, and I understood from the Department of the Economy officials who have spoken to the person in question that this was the only correspondence sent directly to me. However, a subsequent email to my private account the following week has now come to light, in which there is a reference to concerns about the scheme. Mr Speaker, it has also been alleged that I contributed to the problem by putting the introduction of the domestic RHI ahead of cost controls on the non-domestic scheme. It is quite wrong of anyone to describe this as a smoking gun. I make no apology at all for having pushed to see the domestic scheme introduced, as that was a totally legitimate and rational decision on the information available to me at the time. I did not receive any indication that cost control of the non-domestic scheme was an urgent priority at that time, and the Department of the Economy is seeking to establish the facts as to why the warning signals that had been given, not least those from the concerned citizen, were not escalated within the department, and it is important that this work progresses to a conclusion as soon as possible. So, to sum up, at no time during my period as Minister were any recommendations made to me to introduce cost controls, nor were there any warning signs that spending on the scheme was spiralling out of control. In fact, during my time in the department, there was an underspend of the money available to us. I now want to turn to touch on the period after I left the Department of Enterprise, Trade and Investment. In May 2015, I became Finance Minister and had no role whatsoever in relation to the decision of the Deputy Minister to amend the scheme. The then First Minister, Peter Robinson, has also made it clear that he was unaware of the issues around RHI, as they had not been brought to him as either party leader or First Minister. Therefore, at no time did he seek to intervene either. Let there be no doubt, the decision in relation to the amendment of the RHI scheme was a matter for the Deputy Minister. The timing of the introduction of cost controls was entirely a matter for him. It has been suggested that my party sought to influence the decision in relation to the timing of the introduction of the cost controls. It has only been in recent days that I have been aware of this allegation and have now taken the opportunity to investigate it. The only person who would have been in a position to instruct the Deputy Minister would have been the First Minister at that time. This has been checked with the First Minister, the then First Minister, who has made it clear that the problems surrounding RHI were never brought to him either as First Minister or party leader. He made it clear that therefore he could not and did not intervene in any way. No other minister took any role in this matter, nor did they make any representations in relation to it. I can confirm that the DUP party officers took no interest or role in the question of the RHI. Therefore, regardless of what, if anything, was said in relation to the role of the party, no one had any authority to instruct the Deputy Minister to do anything. I would add that there is no evidence whatsoever of Mr Bell raising any concerns with the First Minister if he felt that he was being pressurised. Let me make it absolutely clear. Any suggestion that the Enterprise Minister was instructed to delay the changes to the RHI scheme is totally without foundation. By way of a submission from John Mills, the then Director of Energy Division in DETI, on the 31st of December 2015, a recommendation was made to the then Minister to close the RHI scheme due to concerns over an overspend. The Minister agreed to this proposal. A subsequent submission from John Mills of the 19th of January 2016 recommended steps to close the scheme by early to mid-March 2016. These submissions were based on the assumption that conventional processes of consultation and committee clearance were required. The Minister signed off on this submission on Friday, the 22nd of January, agreeing to the early to mid-March closure. However, As a result of concerns, a hold was put on this decision within half an hour. In late January 2016, complaints about the operation of the RHI scheme were made to me. I informed the Deputy First Minister and I passed them on to the Head of the Civil Service. I was deeply concerned that the proposed mid-March closure date, in light of the growing financial pressures, and the Executive agreed on the 5th of February to a closure around the 15th of February. Immediately after the announcement of the early closure of the scheme, concerns were raised in relation to those who had already installed boilers but had not yet applied, who would be disadvantaged, on the basis that 1. Cost control measures were now in place, 2. There was a danger of legal challenges to those who had installed boilers but had not yet received authorisation, and 3. With the agreement of senior civil servants, it was decided that the scheme should remain open for a further 2 weeks. As the Enterprise Minister at the time highlighted in the Assembly, he took the decision with the agreement of the First Minister and the Deputy First Minister. The extension of the amended scheme was an entirely proper and proportionate step to take in all of the circumstances. And once again, for the record, the scheme was closed earlier than initially approved by the Minister for the Department of Enterprise, Trade and Investment. Since the announcement of my decision to make this statement, the former Minister for Enterprise, Trade and Investment has given an interview to the BBC. In that, he makes a number of allegations in relation to the decision to amend and then subsequently to close the scheme. I think that it is important that I also take this opportunity to put on record the factual position in relation to a number of those allegations. Mr Bell alleged on several occasions that he took action immediately to introduce cost control measures into the scheme and signed off the submission at the most immediate point he could. This is untrue. Today, my colleague, the Minister for the Economy, is placing in the Assembly Library a copy of the submission that was agreed by the former Minister. It will show that the Minister received a submission on the 8th of July 2015 recommending the introduction of cost control measures. It will also indicate that the original proposal from officials was to introduce cost controls from October 1, 2015, but was amended to 4 November 2015 and signed off by the then Minister on the 3 September 2015. It is apparent from this document that action was not taken immediately, but after considerable delay. Mr Bell further claims that other SPADs became involved in the process who were, and I quote, not allowing the scheme to close. The fact remains that the Minister signed off a proposal which was to take effect from the 4 November 2015. The only further delay in the introduction of cost control measures was as a result of legal and financial issues being resolved by departmental officials and were unconnected to any ministerial decision. The decision was solely for the Deputy Minister to take. The former Deputy Minister claims that he made a decision to amend the RHI scheme, but that he was overruled by special advisers. Since last week, I have specifically investigated this claim. The evidence is clear. The only decision taken by the Minister was in early September to amend the scheme in November. The Minister was not subsequently overruled by special advisers, and I am clear that whatever representations may have been made by anyone on this issue, it was not being done with the authority of the party. Now, I understand from Minister Hamilton that the Permanent Secretary recalls being told at the time that some in the party wanted the scheme kept open. He was unaware of the source of this suggestion, but believes it may have been based on the erroneous but widespread view at the time that because the scheme was AMI funded, that it was possible to maximise take-up without creating a problem. I have checked and confirmed that no minister made any such request or took any interest in the decision taken in September 2015. The DUP party officers took no interest in this issue and gave no instructions. It is therefore clear that whatever the belief, the DUP did not ask the Deputy Minister to extend the scheme. I also understand that when the suggestion of a 4-week extension was mentioned in the Deputy Issues meeting on the 24th of August, the Deputy Minister did not voice any objections. In fact, he endorsed the decision. The bottom line is that this decision was taken by the Deputy Minister, and no attempt was made to overrule him, and no such allegation was made at the time. In fairness to the Deputy Minister, I should say that I also understand from Minister Hamilton that departmental officials did not object to a 4-week extension. Mr Bell also claimed that he acted in the way that he did because of what he referred to as collective responsibility. This demonstrates a total and fundamental misunderstanding of the Convention of Collective Responsibility. The doctrine of collective responsibility refers to a convention by which, once Cabinet has taken a decision, all other ministers are expected to abide by it or resign. In this case, there was no decision of the Northern Ireland Executive, nor had there ever been any conversation between DUP ministers, much less a decision on the matter. There has been no allegation from Mr Bell that the First Minister, Peter Robinson, sought to delay the change to the scheme. The issue of collective responsibility has no bearing whatsoever on this issue. Indeed, it is clear from Mr Bell's statement concerning the 2-week delay in February that he could robustly defend his role as Minister and would not change his course on the basis of SPAD's acting without any ministerial authority or cover. In discussing the decisions around autumn of 2015, Mr Bell also claims he has a fact that he says reveals the role of special advisers in the scheme staying open. He then refers to a conversation he had with the Deputy Secretary of the Department, claiming his own special adviser had been asked by other special advisers to remove references to Arlene Foster and to the Department of Finance and Personnel. This is the key allegation, that documents were amended, and is a crucial point. The truth is very different from that suggested by Mr Bell. I can set out the simple facts based on the official records of the Department for the Economy. Firstly, the only conversation approximating to this version of events took place in February of 2016, not in 2015. Secondly, it relates to paperwork concerning the closure of the scheme in 2016, not the introduction of cost controls in 2015. Thirdly, the Deputy Adviser accepts that any changes he made were made of his own volition and not on the request of others. Fourthly, the amendment that was made relates to one draft submission before it was finalised for the Minister to consider, not any attempt to delete emails or government records. Fifthly, the reference that was removed was one highlighting the role of OFMDFM in wishing to see the scheme closed more quickly and without consultation. The removal of this reference had the effect of avoiding any impression that the Deputy Minister had been told that he had agreed to a process of closing the scheme, which was too slow. Sixthly, this was a submission from the Deputy Minister only and did not impact on the document which was being forwarded on for the First Minister and Deputy First Minister. Seventh, and most importantly, the change to the submission had absolutely no effect on anything in the real world. The timing and process for suspension of the scheme had already been agreed. Minister Hamilton asked for urgent clarification of this issue from officials, who provided a note setting out the factual position. That was released to the media last evening, and the Minister has also placed in the Assembly Library copies of the draft submission with the tracked changes marked, and the final version was then approved by the then Minister. In relation to the closure of the scheme in 2016, Mr Bell has alleged that he wanted to close the scheme immediately. Once again, let us return to the documentary evidence. Firstly, let me refer to a submission dated the 19th of January 2016. This proposed a closure date of early to mid-March 2016 and was signed off by the then Minister, Mr Bell. The Deputy First Minister and I believed that we should act more quickly, and a further submission was prepared by Deputy officials which provided 3 options. Minister Hamilton has also left a copy of this submission in the Assembly Library. In it, officials recommended a longer process to close the scheme over a longer period of time, but it was agreed that it should be closed as quickly as possible. So even taking into account the issue of the 2-week delay that was agreed after the announcement, after all the complex processes, the simple truth is the scheme closed earlier than had initially been proposed by the Deputy Minister. This reality is that it was the intervention of OFMDFM that ensured an earlier closure of the scheme than would otherwise have been the case. To deal briefly with that subsequent 2-week delay in RHI closure, let's remember it was decided after cross-party concerns that the scheme should not close within a fortnight of the announcement. Members across this House voiced concern that businesses that had just bought boilers would be left in the lurch. The 2-week extension Mr Bell then agreed to as Minister was supported by myself and the Deputy First Minister. Other parties of this House, of course, wanted it to be longer. Cost controls were in place for RHI at this stage, and civil servants were content with the 2-week period. And this is not an exhaustive rebuttal of the allegations made by Mr Bell, but I hope it will convey with documentary evidence what actually happened. I also want to make it clear that I support the need for an independent investigation, free from partisan political interference, to establish the facts around the Renewable Heat Incentive Scheme. I believe that the conclusions of any investigation must be made public and that any investigation must be conducted speedily to assist in the process of building public confidence. I have been working to reach agreement with officials and others on the precise details of such an investigation over the last number of days, and I hope that this can be resolved in the next few days. Mr. Speaker, while there will be a significant interest in how we came to the present position, the most important issue for us now is to mitigate the costs of the scheme. Minister Hamilton plans to make a statement to the Assembly as soon as possible in the new year. The hope and intent is to reduce significantly the cost of the scheme to the Executive's budget, but the details are still subject to considerable further work. This matters, as we want to be fair to all those who responded to the incentive as it was intended to operate, and also to ensure that our process resolves completely the widespread abuse of the scheme. So, in conclusion, Mr. Speaker, unlike others, my priority in all of this is not headline grabbing, nor is it grandstanding. My priority, just as it was when I pressed for the earlier closure of the scheme rather than let it run to March, is to ensure lessons are learned and to reduce the projected cost. When I became First Minister, I said I could think of no greater honour than to serve my country and the people of Northern Ireland. It's not a responsibility I take lightly. I am not immune to the considerable anger and frustration this issue has caused. Not only do I understand it, I feel it too. I share those emotions because I am proud of this place and I want the best for it, and that's why I entered politics. I did not enter politics to shirk or shy away from difficult decisions. The record shows that I have always put Northern Ireland first. The record shows that I have worked hard throughout my political and ministerial career to bring more investment and more jobs to Northern Ireland. The record shows that I have worked hard to keep Northern Ireland moving forward, and I will continue to do so as First Minister. And that is why, Mr. Speaker, rather than whipping up a media storm, I have actually been dealing with the problem, along with my ministerial colleague Simon Hamilton and with the Finance Minister, on a practical solution, because, Mr. Speaker, that's what responsible politicians do. That's what government is about. On a personal note, I want very much to thank each and every member of the public who has called my office at Stormont, and indeed DUP offices across the length and breadth of Northern Ireland, to offer words of support and encouragement. It really is appreciated. I will continue to work hard, as I have done throughout my political career, on everyone's behalf to ensure a better and a more stable future for Northern Ireland.
Call Mr. William Humphrey.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the First Minister for the lengthy and comprehensive statement she's just given this House. Can I ask the First Minister what her view is of those who say they want facts and clarity around this situation, who, when they have the opportunity to listen to those facts about the scheme, walk out of this chamber in an irresponsible way, in a media stunt to seek to draw attention and headlines for themselves, and more interested in spin and propaganda and not providing the truth for the people of Northern Ireland?
Well, I just don't know what to say in relation to this matter, because for weeks now, people have been calling on me to come forward, calling on me to go to the PAC. I said I'd go to the PAC. That wasn't good enough. I said I would come to this House, I would set out the facts, I would take questions from members of this House, and where are they? Where are they? The people of Northern Ireland deserve better than this, Mr. Speaker. The people of Northern Ireland will look at this today and say, what is all that about? What is all that about? But let me tell you this, having listened to people from right across Northern Ireland, and I haven't been hiding away, I've been out and about. I've been out and about in Upper Bann, I've been in South Belfast, I've been in my own constituency. I have been listening very carefully to what people have to say, and they are angry, but they want a plan as to how to deal with this. I'm setting out a plan as to how to deal with this matter, whilst others seek party political advantage, and I regret that. I regret that deeply, but others have to answer for themselves.
I call Mr. Sidney Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and can I thank the First Minister for her detailed statement to the House today. First Minister, in relation to cost controls, could you explain why the cost controls in Great Britain and the Great Britain scheme were not replicated in the Northern Ireland scheme?
Well, I thank the member for his question. I have taken the opportunity over the weekend to speak to officials to establish why this is the case, and there are three reasons. I have to say none of them are good, or none of them are very acceptable, because cost controls, of course, as we know now with the benefit of hindsight, should have been in place right from the beginning of the scheme. The three reasons are this. First of all, there was an understanding from the specialist report, the SEPA report, that the tariff set was lower than the cost of the fuel, and that was the fundamental mistake, as I said in my statement. The suggested rate for biomass boilers below 100 kW was set initially at 4.5 pence per kWh. And at this rate, the consultants noted there was no need for tiering, as at the time the proposed rate was less than the cost of wood pellets, and therefore there was no incentive to excessively use the boilers just to claim the subsidy. Secondly, there was not the level of demand for the Northern Ireland RHI in the first few years. In fact, the first application for the scheme was received in January of 2013, and remember the scheme opened in November of 2012. And over the first 4 years, there was an underspend of approximately £15 million. Therefore, it was thought, incorrectly as it turns out, that the need for introducing cost controls didn't arise. And the third issue is around governance. And the governance processes within the department did not enforce compliance with commitments given when the scheme was approved, including careful review of tariffs and risks, and cost control was proposed back in the 2013 consultation paper, but it wasn't acted upon. So there was no submission to me saying, we think you need to look at cost controls, or this has been raised as an issue. Nothing came to me in relation to that matter. So the cost controls in Great Britain, of course, should have been replicated in the Northern Ireland scheme. I'm giving you the reasons that have been given to me as to why they weren't replicated, and of course they're not good enough, but those are the reasons that were given to me.
Call Lord Morrell.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I too would like to thank the First Minister for her very comprehensive statement here today. I think it is most regrettable that those who have barked and shouted the most about this issue, when there was an opportunity for them to learn some facts around it, what did they do? We're not interested in the facts. They just walked out, so they ran away. And I think the Minister is to be congratulated on her comprehensive report. But could I ask the Minister that since there has been much speculation as to why cost controls were not introduced when the scheme was established, was any advice given to the Minister in 2012 about cost controls? And indeed, can the Minister tell us what proposals for cost controls were considered and then rejected by the Minister?
Well, back in 2012, there were no submissions to me in relation to cost controls. As I've indicated in my last answer, cost controls of a sort were set out for comment in the 2013 consultation paper. And, you know, it's not unreasonable for a minister to expect that this document would have been acted upon and I would have been given a submission after the consultation closed. But in fact, there was never a formal submission responding to that part of the consultation. I then went on to look at the introduction of the domestic scheme, but that's not a good enough reason for not bringing me a proposal or a recommendation in respect of the non-domestic scheme. And it should have been, especially given by that stage the concerned citizen had been in and she had spoken to officials on a number of occasions, but yet they still didn't think it was the right thing to do to send me a submission in relation to these issues. So I deeply regret that was the case.
Mr. Christopher Stalford.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I thank the First Minister for the statement that she has made. In the precursor to it, several members were raising points of order and raising the issue of undermining the credibility of this House. Does the Minister agree with me that what undermines the credibility of this House is when elected members of this House run away from fulfilling their function of answering questions in this place and instead choose to do so in TV studios?
Well, of course it undermines this place when members do not stay here and ask the appropriate questions, but instead go outside and indulge in media spin. But unfortunately, it's not the first time that some of the members of this House have done that. We all remembered the Ulster Unionist Party stunt when I was appointed after the election, about how they were going out of the executive and bring it on and all that sort of stuff. What was it? Let battle begin, wasn't that it? Let battle begin. That was when they decided not to go in the executive, so they ran away there. Of course, they'd ran away before that in relation to the issue around the talks of the Fresh Start, when they decided not to engage there as well. So this is not new. This is a pattern. This is a pattern, I have to say. But I don't think they serve their constituents well. They don't. What they should be doing, if they want to challenge me, the place to challenge me is in this House, Mr. Speaker. The place to challenge me is in this House. But instead, they will stay out. They will come in this afternoon and they will put down an exclusion motion, even though they haven't been here to question me on these issues. They will come here with an exclusion motion even before the PAC have finished their investigation, but they've made up their mind about the First Minister of Northern Ireland. But thankfully, the electorate has also made up their mind in relation to the First Minister of Northern Ireland.
Call Mrs Palm-Cameron.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the First Minister for a very comprehensive statement to the House this morning. And it's quite obvious from this morning's events that there are many members who should be in this chamber who do not want this devolved government to be in any way successful or succeed or to do its job in a rightful way, and that has been shown. Can I ask the First Minister about the newsletter published a story this morning in relation to the regulatory impact assessment? I want to ask her, on what basis did the Minister sign off on the regulatory impact assessment, and should it not have been apparent that there was a fatal flaw at the heart of the scheme?
Well, I thank the member for her question, because it's an important question and I'm glad she's asked it. First of all, let me say our opponents told us today was an important day, and then they couldn't be bothered to show up. Can't be bothered to show up and ask me questions in relation to the sorts of things that the members asked me a question about. In relation to the regulatory impact assessment, in that assessment the Department recognised that setting incorrect support payment levels, the RHI tariff, posed the most obvious risk to the Northern Ireland scheme. If the level was set too high, those installing renewable heat will be over-subsidised and less heat will be delivered per pound than under more optimal subsidy levels. Alternatively, if the rate was set too low, renewable heat will not be deployed to the extent expected. And within that document, it was made clear that there were to be regular, planned reviews of subsidy levels after a number of years of experience with the subsidy. And that would, of course, have provided the opportunity to amend tariffs if needed and to ensure that they remain appropriate given the potential changing market conditions. And of course the market does change, and we've seen that in terms of the price of wood pellets, the price of oil, the price of gas. And it was proposed in that RIA that the first review would begin in January 2014 with any changes that were needed by the 1st of April 2015. The review did not happen. Departmental officials did not carry out that review. And as Minister, I believe that I have the right to expect that risks identified in an RIA would be managed by officials. And as the Accounting Officers has explained at length to the Public Accounts Committee, there were several important commitments made at the time when RHI was approved, not least in respect of risk management, which were not followed through. And those omissions by officials contributed materially to the very, very serious problem that we now face. And that's already under investigation in the fact-finding work that has been discussed with the PAC, and I look forward to the outworkings of the PAC. And as I've already said on the record, I'm more than happy to go to the PAC, even though that's not the convention. I'm happy to go to the PAC. And the reason I'm happy to go to the PAC, Mr. Speaker, is I have nothing to hide in this matter. Absolutely nothing. I'm putting everything out there. I'm calling for an inquiry if we can get that arranged with colleagues. I've nothing to hide. So why would other members therefore bring an exclusion motion to exclude me? It is all party politics, and this party will not be a part of it.
Call Mr Nelson McCausland.
Thank you, Mr Speaker, and could I thank the First Minister for her statement and answers to questions which bring a great deal of clarity and dispel a lot of the confusion that folk have generated from other supporters around this matter. And could I ask the First Minister then, has she been able to ascertain or establish who was responsible for the assumption that cost controls were not necessary as they thought the market price of wood pellets was higher than the tariff?
I thank the member for his question. And it appears to have been a mistake that was made by DETI officials. The initial report from the consultant SEPA suggested rate for biomass boilers below 100 kW was set at 4.5 pence per kilowatt hour, based on a 20 kilowatt biomass boiler reference case. And at that rate, the consultants noted there was no need for tiering, as at that time the proposed rate was less than the cost of wood pellets, and therefore there would be no incentive to excessively use the boilers just to claim the subsidy. The consultants were then asked to reconsider the rates following feedback from the industry after the consultation process, and in February 2012 the consultants produced a new paper which increased the rates to account for a larger reference case boiler of 50 kilowatts in size rather than the original 20 kilowatts reference case. The rate proposed for biomass boilers less than 100 kW was increased in this paper to 5.9 pence per kilowatt hour, but there was no mention of the need for tiering, or that this was not in excess of the cost of wood pellets. So the final business case, approved by DFP in mid-2012, included a 5.9 pence tariff, which has subsequently been increased with inflation to 6.4 pence per kilowatt hour. And in the business case to DFP, the department stated that there was no need to consider tiering because the rate proposed was lower than the cost of fuel, and therefore there would be no incentive to abuse the system by generating heat just to claim the subsidy. However, in the case of biomass boilers, this was simply not true. In fact, the cost of wood pellets was shown in the same business case as being 4.39 pence per kilowatt hour, compared to the proposed tariff. So it was there. It was there in black and white what the wood pellet cost was in terms of the proposed tariff of 6.4 pence per kilowatt. But so nobody in DETI, nobody in SEPA or nobody in DFP spotted that that was the case, and therein lies the fundamental problem.
Members, that concludes questions on the statement.